Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for an MP webinar on innovative hiring strategies for remote recruiting. I'm Amy Weeman, the head of marketing here at MP. And for those of you joining us on a webinar for the first time, MP is a full-service human capital management company offering a complete suite of products and services to support employers through the entire employee life cycle, including recruiting, HR, payroll, benefits administration, time and attendance, and compliance assistance. We support our clients with cutting-edge technical solutions, as well as proactive, reliable service and deep HR and payroll expertise. At MP, we are wired for HR and help our clients succeed by aligning their people strategy with their business goals. I am thrilled to introduce your presenters for today, two of MP's top recruiting experts, Maureen Harrington and Tracy Westcott. Maureen Harrington is a lead talent acquisition recruiter with MP. Her areas of expertise include sales, retail, and finance. Maureen has been a recruiter for BJ's Wholesale Club and Middlesex Savings Bank. Prior to working in human resources, Maureen spent 12 years as a development consultant to local and national nonprofit organizations. She holds a master's degree from Northeastern University and a BA from the State University of New York, New Paltz. She's a member of NERA, Northeast Human Resource Association. Tracy is the Talent Solutions Manager for RPO, Recruitment Process Outsourcing here at MP. She's been in the talent acquisition field for nearly 2 decades and acted as a talent acquisition lead at Public Partnerships for 9 years. She holds a bachelor's degree from St. Michael's College in Vermont and has received her PHR, Professional Human Resources license from HRCI. And just a quick disclaimer before we get started today. While we hope you learn a lot, this training is intended for educational and informational purposes only, and it should not be construed as legal advice. And just quickly before we get started, we will be sending out a recording as well as the slide deck later today. And if you have a question during the program, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And with that, I will hand the mic off to Tracy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate that. So today, Maureen and I are going to talk about recruiting in this new and ever-changing recruiting market, primarily focusing on different ways to attract remote talent right now. So to start, we'll start talking about some best practices to ensure remote recruiting success. We'll talk about creating a positive candidate and employer experience throughout the hiring process. We'll talk about how to optimize your tech stack in a remote environment, and then also different ways that you can promote company culture in a remote environment. So just to kick it off, I want to talk a little bit about hire and retain. Amy, if you can go back to that last slide. So to get started, I want to talk about just some different shifts within talent acquisition in HR in general. So the first thing as a recruiter or a hiring manager or any HR professional really, and something that we need to think about is understanding the need for a shift in that traditional mentality of hire and retain and make that shift to attract and provide. So from a recruiting perspective, thinking about what you're doing from a marketing and recruiting perspective to really attract candidates and to really stand out in the marketplace to attract the right types of candidates that you want to bring in to your organization. And from the provide perspective, that's really where the HR piece comes in that HR is there to provide them with the resources. And with that, we've really kind of reinvented the traditional function of human resources and changed to more of the people approach or people teams. And this shift, as I said, is really kind of happened, with the idea of focusing on talent and your people. And HR is kind of moving away from that primary focus of being, mostly compliance and, decreasing liability and really focusing on, the people aspect of it. So however, the idea of people teams is really to maximize the value of the people and the employees who work there by providing them with those resources to be successful. And obviously with that, in being successful, it ultimately, drives up revenue and becoming an employer of choice. So from a candidate perspective, it really attracts, candidates to want to work for you. And if you look at some of the top employers with tenured employees and happy employees, they are more successful because they're given the tools and the support and the opportunity to be successful there. And then as it relates to recruiting, I think the power, as many people know in recruiting, or if you're trying to hire right now at all, the power has really shifted from the company to the candidates. Candidates have more power over their career and where they want to go right now. So they really have the ability to be selective. So we'll talk about some of those ways to really stand out. And then it's really just about, again, getting involved in the development of new teams too. From a recruiting perspective, it's become much more evident that recruiting needs to get involved or should be involved a lot sooner, as opposed to being more reactive in their hiring approach. So throughout the webinar, we'll go over, some of the different details about how companies and recruiting and HR can really focus on their current processes to be able to attract the best candidates in this very competitive, primarily remote market. So as we all know, the first impression is recruiting. So it's really important to really focus on what you're doing to really attract candidates from a recruiting perspective. So in this section, we will talk about some of the best practices to ensure remote recruiting success. So the kind of questions that I ask clients and that we talk about internally too is, do you have a plan in place to attract candidates? What are you offering them to provide for them? How are you communicating to stay engaged? So do you have a plan in place to attract? So the first piece, is that I want to talk about is remote, hybrid, or office-based positions. And this can be really tricky. And I think that now more than ever, there really can't be any blurred lines. And it's important to really create defined policies and guidelines around those expectations. The work from anywhere mentality isn't always the case if it's remote. As we know, there are compliance implications as it relates to where the employee is working. Depending on what state they're working in, there's different tax compliances that need to be taken into effect. So it's really important to make sure that those guidelines and expectations are clear. For hybrid, if they're expected to be on the office certain days a week, really just having a clear defined guideline around what that looks like so that your employees can be successful. And then for employer branding, what does your web presence look like? From a recruiting perspective, ensuring that your Glassdoor, your website, Indeed, LinkedIn, Career Builder, all of those job boards are consistent in matching to your branding. If you don't have that, maybe you're a smaller company and you don't have a full, HR recruiting department. I mean, you can assign somebody to focus on, curating that employer brand, building content on there to showcase your company culture, highlight the benefits, how you embrace diversity, how you serve the community. Those are all things that candidates are looking for. And it's the first thing that they're doing when they're doing their due diligence, when they're looking at you as a company and whether or not they want to work for you. And then the other thing with reviews, for example, Glassdoor, what are you doing when you receive a bad review? I think that, if you are receiving a bad review, are you responding to it in a tone that isn't defensive? And thanks the reviewer for their feedback. Let the candidates know, or the previous employees, that their voice is heard it says a lot about your culture, and people are looking at that. They're looking at that when they are looking at, whether or not they want to be considered, at your company. And then also, how are your employees supporting each other online, right? Congratulating promotions or other successes publicly is really great to build your brand and your employer brand online. And then lastly, really the diminishing quality of direct applicants. I mean, that's really the number one thing when I talk to clients right now. The post and coast mentality is really a thing of the past. But there are things that employers can do to really increase their candidate pool. For example, a job description. Research has shown that job descriptions with too many requirements and nice to haves can actually turn people away rather than focusing on what is expected to be accomplished in that role. So this can really encourage and attract more people with non-traditional experiences to apply to your positions. And then with that, as you're getting these different skill sets that might be applying for positions that are a little outside their skills, you're still building that pipeline within your applicant tracking system, and they have expressed interest within your company. So it really just helps you more long-term too, to really build that pipeline. So I want to bring Maureen a little bit in here, because I know, Maureen, you talk with our clients on a day-to-day basis. So, I mean, what are some of the ways that you've seen some of, our clients, or, just in general, people shift their focus and becoming a little bit more flexible with their job descriptions as it relates to the specific requirements?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. We definitely are seeing a shift in with our clients that are starting to thinking about asking different questions and incorporating different aspects in the job descriptions. One of the questions I see asked a lot is, or answered in a job description is, what will you do? And it talks a little bit, gets to your point earlier about talking about the job and what it is that we're looking to accomplish. And clearly a candidate can check off that list and say, okay, oh, I've done that before. I've done this before. I've done that before. And that's really a really great way to showcase and talk about the job versus, as you mentioned, the requirements, and really looking at traditional or non-traditional candidates and kind of reducing those requirements, if you will. Think about that when you're doing your job descriptions of, do you need a list of 5 to 10 requirements, or can you list just a few? The other piece I see often is preferred requirements, right? They're the nice to haves. So it's not that you have to have experience in, CRM software. It's a preferred requirement. So, again, listing that as a preference, but not a deal breaker, sometimes can help separate that out. So being able to list those a little bit differently and keeping, like Tracy shared, those down to a minimum, right? You should never have more than 3 or 5 at most for a candidate to check off. And the other thing I recently learned in chatting with people online too, and through my networks, is something that not everybody knows, but it probably can resonate with a lot of people on the call today, is that women in particular, when they see all of those requirements, are less likely to apply for jobs. Studies have shown that they're 50% less likely than men to apply for jobs that they feel that they haven't checked every box. So think about that when you're putting up your job descriptions about what kind of candidate you like to attract. And if you're attracting a woman who might think she has to check every requirement box, what that would mean. So that really reduces your funnel when you think about it, your candidate funnel, and your pipeline pool of people to be able to pull from when you've got, a group of people that are just opting out from applying altogether. Another thing that I hear a lot about in talking about women is that we have a lot of them still out of the workforce, right? There's a huge opportunity to hire them back into the workforce, who, especially for those that were forced to leave due to childcare. We know that nearly 1.8 million women have dropped out of the labor force during the pandemic and are grappling on how to return to work in this very different landscape that we've returned to, right? Returning to work for them, for many of them, and for parents in general, they need to find a new form of childcare, and that can be challenging. Taking into account the labor force was growing pre-pandemic, right? When we had plenty of candidates. We've lost 2.3 fewer women working now than before the pandemic happened. So when considering, women are considering a lot of things regarding their career, and a lot of them are leaving the workforce altogether. We've seen a number of firms, including Deloitte and McKinsey, that have done those surveys, and they found nearly 3 in 5 women plan to leave their employers in the next 2 years or less, citing the lack of work-life balance. So again, thinking about being flexible is something for employers to consider. Small, medium, large-sized businesses. You really have to think about where that flex can happen in a day. One thing I think about often is, from a start to a finish of a day, can there be that flex time to either drop off a child or pick up a child during the day from school? Another thing to consider when looking at candidates are potential gaps in resumes. You're going to see a lot of particularly parents and women in general who are going to have gaps in their resume over the course of the early part of the pandemic or the last 18 months. So really thinking about that when you're recruiting, and not maybe putting your hat on a little bit differently when you look at those candidates who don't have any work experience in the last 18 months because they've taken time out to care for their families and care for children at home. So something to think about.
Awesome. Thank you, Maureen. I know you've actually been doing quite a bit to help too, as far as just updating job descriptions and really kind of just, making them more attractive to a wider candidate pool has just been, we've seen it just within our team. It's been successful in making those, updates. Can you make it a 30-hour-a-week job instead of a 40-hour-a-week? So thinking about that just to attract, more candidates. So thank you for sharing that, Maureen. You can go to the next slide. The other thing, and actually this is something that Maureen and I talk about a lot as it relates to remote recruiting success and just recruiting in general right now, is really the conversations around benefits. We actually have a great ebook that we released a couple weeks ago around benefits and different ideas, but that is a conversation now that has really been front and center. People are asking about benefits, what's in it for me outside of their pay rate. Why, again, it's another thing that, they're asking for, why should they take this job over the other 3 offers that they have? So really looking at that. So I don't know, Maureen, if you want to add anything to that piece, just around benefits and some conversations you've had with candidates.
Yeah, certainly those conversations, Tracy, are happening a lot sooner. I know we've talked about that before. So I know as a recruiter, on my initial phone screens with candidates and reaching out to them, oftentimes when we get to that, do you have any questions for me, part of that conversation, I'm getting those questions about benefits, right? What do you offer? What does the employer offer in terms of a benefits package? And they're not looking or asking me about medical or dental benefits. They're asking about work-life balance, flexibility. They're asking, especially the younger generation, pet benefits. Do we have those? They're asking about paid family leave. We know that's on the forefront of a lot of different states right now, but it is something as an employer that you can think about putting policy in place. They're often asking about professional development and growth. Those conversations happen a lot earlier in the discussion. And so when you're thinking about recruiting and you're talking with candidates right off the bat, you have to be prepared for those types of questions and how you respond to them, because they speak to the culture of the company that you're working with, and the work-life balance that they may have there. Another item that comes up, especially with remote, is the stipends piece. We've heard of a number of different employers that are offering a stipend for their remote workers, whatever that may be, to help them with purchases for things they might need for their home office, to make them maybe feel more comfortable, whether that's a second monitor, a more comfortable chair, other things in their office space at home that they would normally have in an office, but need to accommodate it at their home office. So we've seen employers offering those remote stipends both on a yearly basis or a monthly basis. And that's something that the candidates now are starting to think about. And thinking about collaboration is another thing that comes up a lot too. Folks are looking for those opportunities to be able to collaborate with other team members when they're remote. They're craving for that connection. So thinking about how collaboration plays a part in your culture as well.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing to this piece of it, Maureen, is just, as far as a takeaway, is that the conversations are just happening sooner. So it really just goes to really show the importance of it in really developing and putting together a good plan, and really just being able to promote that on the front end too. So thank you for sharing that. We can go to the next slide. So the next piece, just as far as how you're communicating and really staying engaged, with the candidates throughout the process. And again, creating a clear and concise process, having transparency. Define next steps in timelines. It sounds pretty simple, but it's so important to make sure that they have that throughout the process to really keep them engaged. I know for us, one of the things that we do is we have our intake form. We use it internally, we use it for clients, but really it gives us everything that we need to be able to provide to the candidate to let them know what they can expect going forward. Again, very simple, but often forgotten, which takes me to the next 2 points really, which is really just being available, to the candidate. So having that communication, constant communication with them right now will set you apart. I know a lot of people use this, but the booking tools, right? So for initial meetings, sending a link so that the recruiters and the candidates don't need to go back and forth to just determine, when they can do a screen. I mean, you can cut down a day or two with that back and forth. Another thing, for transparency around being available for the candidate, between the recruiter and the candidate, having a 15-minute booking link available to them so that they can schedule a time or reschedule as needed, so that they feel that know that they're still in process and still being engaged throughout the process, because they are still getting emails, they're still getting responses to their applications and getting reached out to. So just keeping them engaged and having that transparency. The other thing is just go the extra mile and stand out. Do you have culture videos that you can share with them early on in the process? It's going to make them remember that phone screen that they had. Maybe they had 5-10 phone screens that day, but they'll remember it if they saw the culture videos. And then just it really just kind of gets them excited. And then the other thing that you can implement too, that I've seen kind of more recently, is video responses to replace an email. So there's a few different platforms that can do it, but instead of sending an email, send them a quick video response, a live video response from you. It really, again, it makes you stand out, and it keeps the candidate fully engaged throughout that process. And then as it relates to staying engaged in communication, I just want to talk a little bit about creating a positive experience for both the candidate and the employer throughout that hiring process. I think it's equally as important to think about the employer as it relates to the hiring manager, keeping them engaged, things like that. So I do think too, it's really a balancing act between technology and personal connection right now, where we'll get more into this a little bit later. about, talking about, different tech stacks, but really understanding where technology can replace, say, a phone call, and where a phone call should replace technology, right? So there still needs to be some personal connection, but I think technology can help do a lot of the back end stuff for you. I just think of, everybody has heard of someone that this has happened to, but maybe there's been a candidate who, spent hours on end or a full day, or gave a presentation, or even traveled for an interview, spent hours and hours, of going into this interview only to get a generic email that they weren't chosen for the job. So things like that, as far as, again, it's promoting your culture though, providing feedback. Again, it's important to get that feedback from the hiring managers too, to be able to share with that. But I'll say, on the other note, when it comes to technology, if you think about, if you have a phone screen as a recruiter, you have a phone screen with someone, do you need to schedule another 30-minute, call to let them know why they didn't get the job? I don't necessarily think so. And I think that an email can take place for that. However, I think the important piece of that is setting the expectations with the candidate. So the candidate knows that they are going to get an email notification from them as a next step, and really just making sure that you're closing the loop on every interview and phone screen. Again, it seems very simple right now, but just because they weren't a fit for that one job doesn't mean that they won't be a fit in the future. And they're going to tell their friends, they're going to tell their colleagues about a really bad experience or a really good experience. So you really want to be mindful of that now more than ever. So in creating a positive, experience throughout the process, as we go back to the thought of attract and provide, from an attract perspective, how can you differentiate the interview process for a candidate? Again, standing out, sending the culture videos. So one of the things that I actually love that our HR services team implemented a long time ago, that we've since taken over as well, their best practice that they do is, right before they make an offer to a candidate, they set up what they call a team interview or meet and greet. So the purpose of that, they've already determined that this person has the skills, but they really gives them a chance. The entire team will get on a Zoom meeting and just really talk to them, less about specific skills, but really just give them a sense of what it's like to work with them, work with their team. You can talk about things like, what are you most passionate about? If it's an HR position, what are you most passionate about HR? What rattles you? What, attracted you to this position or this company? As a current employee, like, how can you share your experience so that you can get to know each other, and just keep it more conversational? And it just, again, it gives you a sense of whether or not they would want to come work for you, and vice versa, that it's a mutual fit. And then again, as far as attracting, again, share the benefits early on, share it. They want to see it, talk about the culture. You don't want there to be any surprises. Talk about whether it's a remote, hybrid, what the expectations are. And then once the candidate is hired, send a swag box right away. Right? Again, they're still getting responses from their applications, most likely. So set yourself apart and just get them excited, and really just continue to engage them throughout the process. Even after you've made that offer, you have the accepted offer. And then from an employer and a candidate perspective, if there's a long period of time before they start, schedule a Zoom meeting or an in-person lunch or whatever you can to keep them engaged. If they, have 4 weeks between now and when they start, like, what are you doing in those 4 weeks to keep them engaged? Again, it seems pretty simple, but it really goes a long way. And I know that once we get so busy in our day-to-day, things like that can get forgotten. But it's really important. And then when it comes to like hiring managers, just in general, as far as setting up different processes and interview processes to just, again, kind of keep them engaged in it, is is having a defined process across the board for interviews. And, that could be, in the Outlook invite, you have all of the sourcing details, you have a history of the interview timeline, so who they met with, when, if they've taken any assessments. Some assessments have, behavioral-based interview questions that you can ask based on those results. It gives the hiring manager everything right there so that they can go into that interview prepared. As we all know, sometimes that's a minute before the interview. That's the first time that they're looking, at their resume. So give them everything that they can have to be prepared going into that interview. And then the last thing, as far as attracting candidates, and we could probably do an entire webinar on this, but as it relates to remote workforce, thinking about a hub strategy, which is a newer kind of term or strategy, and it's very different from the idea of work from anywhere, right? So I think it's beneficial for both, candidates, current employees, employers, and that's really just, while you might be a remote workforce, maybe focus on certain cities, right? So that it provides you the opportunity to be able to meet in person, whether that's for current employees or for interviews, cross-functionally. I know that's something that, for those who have hub strategies, they might be able to have somebody, meet face-to-face with somebody from a different function for an interview, which again, it really kind of brings cross-functional collaboration by being able to do that. And then it just really, again, it really builds out culture. I know for companies that do that, they'll have their leadership team travel to those different locations periodically so that, they can do any type of professional development or just, for social reasons, what have you. But again, it just brings a little bit more collaboration, even though it could be primarily a remote workforce. And then throughout the hiring process, as it relates to providing, those were obviously ways that, you can attract candidates to the company throughout the process and as you're building out your recruiting strategy. But again, back to what are you doing to provide for them? Setting up a timeline for both the candidate and the hiring manager. Set a timeline for feedback. I know feedback is probably, from a recruiting perspective, could be one of the most frustrating parts of being a recruiter, because you have this really great candidate, they came in to interview, but you're just not getting feedback. We all know how emails can get, so schedule a 10-minute debrief with the hiring manager after the interview, or if they have a couple interviews back to back, schedule a time with them for 10-15 minutes to be able to get that feedback. It's really, really important. And again, it's setting the expectations with both the hiring manager and the candidate. If hiring manager wanted somebody yesterday for this position, it's important for them to commit 10 to 15 minutes to you as the recruiter to move things through the process. Whether that's a good interview, a bad interview, it's important to share that feedback so that the recruiter can be more successful when they pick up the phone and call someone the next time. And I'll just say over communicate versus under communicate if you want to keep a candidate engaged. And then lastly, how are you providing a new hire with a remote work setup? I know Maureen talked about this a little bit, but providing them with the details that they know, what they can expect. If they've already been hired, let them know what's going to be in their remote kit, and then some other, I know Maureen touched on this a little bit, but there's different ways to also be able to cover their remote setup. I know some people might do a $500 lump sum or a monthly stipend. Another thing that I think is fairly unique in that, they might give you a certain percentage, up to a certain amount. That way, you're really buying something that is useful to you if they have a little bit of skin in the game, so to speak, if they're paying for a little bit of that out of pocket. And then, as I mentioned, we wanted to get into how to optimize your tech stack in a remote environment. And I think, a lot of people are doing some of this and utilizing some of it, maybe bits and pieces of it. Obviously, video tools, we're on run right now, Zoom, virtual hiring events are great. I also just think it's more of like the day-to-day that can be really, really important in building out your tech stack so that it's a good, smooth transition every step of the way for both the candidate and from an HR hiring and onboarding perspective. So for recruiting, it's building out templates in your ATS. You don't have to, keep typing the same thing over and over again. Take the time to build the templates out in your ATS. I know one of the things that our team has done is we include the culture videos or who we are, what we do, and that initial email asking to meet with you. Again, it sets you apart, and it's not just words on an email. There's something to watch, right? And then building templates within your bookings tools. Again, putting those booking tools within the templates, that initial email, the candidate can schedule, can reschedule if they need to. It's seamless. It's easier for the recruiter. Integrating your calendars with the applicant tracking system, that includes hiring managers. I know, you could also have the hiring manager going into the applicant tracking system to provide feedback or next steps. You can put timelines on that. Again, it just cuts down the back and forth and less emails, less IMs, things like that. And then automating your employee referral program. These are so important. If I love working at MP and I want everybody I know to want to work here too, right? Like I think it is so important. It's where the best employees come from employee referral. So what are you doing for your employee referral program, depending on, what industry you're in or what types of, candidates you're looking for, that might look different. So it's really strategizing around what that looks like, making it transparent for employees to know that it exists, to know how to refer somebody, to know how to get credit, how much money or what incentive programs you have. The other thing is reference tools. Calling up references can be a thing of the past. I think reference tools are great. They provide really great feedback. It's all confidential. Somebody would much rather do a quick 5-10 minute online survey than get a phone call. So that's another great tool to consider. And then assessment tools. Assessment tools as it relates to personality tools. I know we use predictive index. I've used a bunch of other ones as it relates to different cognitive or skills-based assessments. Even if it's a entry-level payroll position, they're in Excel all day, using Excel, do you have a basic Excel skill-based assessment? There's a lot of tools, fairly inexpensive, all things considered. So definitely something to think about. And then choosing your sourcing tools based on your industry. So there's a lot of different sourcing tools out there. There's a lot of different applicant tracking systems. What is it that you need in it, and where do you want to find people or need to find people? Where is your candidate pool, and building out those sourcing tools from there. The other thing is texting capabilities, being able to text candidates, confirmations, things like that. A lot of times you can do that directly through the applicant tracking system, or there might be like a Chrome extension that you can use. But I think most at this point, applicant tracking systems have that function, but definitely recommend using that function as well. It's to, the tech stack in general. I mean, I think the most efficient way, I think especially if you're a smaller company, it's setting it up correctly at the beginning, like from the start, making sure that you have the processes, because it's a lot easier to build out processes from scratch than fix something that might be a little bit messy. So does your talent acquisition applicant tracking system, where you're sourcing, where you're getting your applicants, your references, assessment tools, accepted offer letters, onboarding. Is that tool then implemented with your HR and payroll? Does once you hire somebody, does that create their onboarding profile for your HR team? And then once that, the candidate is onboarded, that's where they are going to, enroll in their benefits. And again, this is all single login from when they initially started. It's a very smooth, easy transition if everything is integrated. And then, once they're an employee, again, their workforce management, if they need time cards, where are they putting in their time cards, or workforce scheduling, or, expense management. And then also as it relates to talent management, so performance reviews, engagement surveys, stay interviews, learn and grow. So, your learning and development tool, different community service initiatives. And then on offboarding, once if a candidate decides to leave, how are you, getting that equipment back? So there are plenty of tools where, you can have all of that integrated, and you really don't need to have everything piecemeal at this point in order to have a, seamless transition. And it just makes things, as we all know, it makes things easier for both the candidates, employees, HR, and so on, to be able to have everything integrated within your tech stack. And then the last piece, is really moving away from, or making that shift away from the idea of selling your company culture and shifting it to promoting your company culture. Selling just feels a little bit more like you're pushing it on them, right? As opposed to, if you're promoting your company culture, then you're really excited about what you do and what your company does and what you stand for. Again, it's that culture video. Your values and missions, are they important to your company? Throughout your interview process, are you interviewing based on the core values of your company? Again, why I work at, for example, MP, share those types of stories about why you love working there on your, LinkedIn platforms and so on, so that you are, again, really promoting your company culture without, just selling it to people, so to speak. And then just workplace involvement. So bringing people together virtually or in person if you can, not as much right now, of course, still, but, what are you doing to bring people together? I know, we have a client that just did a great video on who they are and what they do. And it was really just a powerful video that they did. And it really, again, it promotes their company culture. And it's a great way, to the next point of building out your web presence, to be able to promote that culture. And then the other thing, from a web presence perspective, praise your staff publicly, employee-driven content. And then again, going back to the employee referral program, having an employee referral program really can build out your company culture and your brand. And yeah, I just think that there's so many ways to just really proactively encourage and promote your company culture. And now we'll, Amy, if you want to take a look and bring any questions, if we've gotten any questions, happy to, take some time to answer some questions.
I don't see any questions in the Q&A, Tracy. If anyone would like to submit a question now, or are there any common questions that you and Maureen received from clients?
One of the things that we didn't, get into a ton, Maureen, if you want to touch on it a little bit, just about employee referral programs. I know we kind of went back and forth of how much to put in that. But so if you want to touch a little bit on employee referral programs.
Sure, Tracy. Tracy really talks about how important they are, which is great. And it can really depend on the type of role that you have. But we've seen some really good examples of ERPs out there, especially ones that could be, as Tracy mentioned, connected in your tech stack. something we use here at MP are weekly email promotions. We're able to customize those to include highlighted jobs and a referral bonus for each of those roles, and share that directly with everyone in our company. And they go out on a weekly basis, and it's a one-click share from there for those folks to then go out into their networks and share that post. So it's really a great source. And as Tracy said, referrals from existing employees is one of the best sources of getting great employees as well. So something else that we've also seen is, running contests based on number of clicks, number of applies on those links, and the number of folks hired. Also, how many referrals did an employee get this month or this quarter, and giving them a shout out at the company meeting for those referrals. Constantly having that top of mind from leadership is really important. Making those pitches at those company meetings, especially in a department meeting. If you've got a department that's hiring, it's certainly to remind people to share those posts with their networks. The other thing we've seen is promotion referral program through business cards, especially in the hospitality, general labor market, customer service type of roles. A business card program could be used when thinking about passing out business cards with that referral piece on it. Whether it includes a link on there or a QRC code for people to scan, and it brings them right to that referral site on a website, and is easily able to type in someone's name that was that referral for them. So think about putting that out in your Salesforce and with your existing employees or out in the field, meeting people, and being able to hand them a business card, that which a lot of us have and don't use frequently enough, to let them know, hey, I had great customer service experience with you, and I think you could be a great addition to our team. Here's a way to apply, and feel free to list me as a referral. So something that's been really successful with those types of companies. Just a couple of ideas to out there to share.
I think, yeah, Maureen, I think that goes back to just kind of understanding and like building out your strategy based on like your candidate pool, right? So, if your candidate pool is not, they're not active on LinkedIn, go the business card route, right? So really just getting creative in different ways, that you can, come up with different ways to be able to, get good people that you would otherwise not be able to, because people love to promote their own company, right? If they love working there. So, and it will get those people excited to want to work for you.
Absolutely. I agree. It's definitely one of those things that you want to create that energy and continue to spread that energy. And you see it here at MP a lot. If you follow us on LinkedIn and other Facebook and other medias as well, we do a really good job promoting and talking. And it's really about promoting, not selling, but promoting. So it's really kind of builds that culture and camaraderie here. Even just the likes I receive when I do a post for a job from my own teammates, even though it has nothing to do with the roles that they're working in, just to see the support there. Really a great way to kind of spread the word and see that camaraderie.
We actually, we did
get you got it, Trace. Okay.
Probably going to ask the same. So we did get a question come in. Can you please redefine tech stack? So, and I'm thank you for asking that. So, so when I think of tech stack, I'm thinking of your applicant tracking system. What different types of technologies are you using, primarily for the purpose of this webinar, really to talk about what you're using from a technology standpoint for recruiting. So, an applicant tracking system. Some companies are smaller, so they don't have an applicant tracking system. If you're looking to grow and you're smaller now, I'd suggest that's the first place I would suggest to start, is implementing an applicant tracking system to start to build out the pipelines. Other different types of, tech stacks is like, what sourcing tools are you using outside of your applicant tracking system to reach other candidates? That's mostly from a sourcing perspective. And then when it comes from, more of the recruiting perspective, from a tech stack, we'd be looking at those reference tools, the assessment tools, you know, things like that, based on, again, what you are looking for, that might look a little bit different. So I hope that was helpful. So the last thing, you know, we'll just talk just a little bit about. So I lead our RPO, recruitment process outsourcing team, also known as MP Talent. And what we do is we're a little bit different than a staffing agency in that, you know, we work primarily with smaller and mid-sized companies to partner with their team from a recruiting perspective. So we would work on a certain number of positions at any given time. And then whether you have an applicant tracking system or sourcing tools or not, we have our own. So we would utilize those and help, you know, your team as you continue to grow and hire. So you'd work directly with a recruiting partner as part of that subscription model, as opposed to, you know, working on one position at any given time, as you would an agency where it's less of a kind of long-term, I guess, committed relationship, so to speak. So then as far as RPO services, who considers it usually, you know, it's really, I mean, we work with some larger companies, I'd say primarily at smaller to mid-size, but if you don't have a full-time recruiter, we can be your recruiting resource. Companies without sophisticated, you know, recruitment or sourcing tools, organizations without an applicant tracking system but need that outreach, we can do that. Businesses with in-house talent acquisition team, but they just need more hands on deck because, as we know right now, it's you know, it's competitive. And then companies who need more resources just to proactively recruit, manage pipeline, take over the day-to-day, things like that. So. And if anybody, you know, wants to reach out to me, this is my contact information. Definitely feel free to reach out. Happy to provide a free consultation after this webinar.
Thank you,
And
Tracy and Maureen. Great program. Many good ideas for recruiting in this interesting recruiting environment right now. Please join us next week. We're doing a deep dive into the employee retention tax credit on Wednesday at 1. Many businesses who are impacted by COVID and the pandemic are finding significant relief from this program, even if they already received the PPP loan. Many, if not most, businesses are eligible for this significant tax credit. So visit our website to register and you'll see our full calendar of events and resources. As Tracy mentioned, last week we released a great new ebook detailing many of the things that Tracy talked about today around remote recruiting, and also really important compliance considerations that employers need to be mindful of as they're recruiting in multi-states. You'll find this all on our resources tab on our website. So thanks again for joining us, and let us know if you have any questions. We'll be sending out a recording and the full slide deck later today. Have a terrific day.